That day started out just like any other, just a normal day. I fixed Toby an omelet before school and he got ready and headed off to school. Toby never told me anything to make me think that he was thinking what he was thinking. Toby was born on a Sunday, September 27th, 1998. We had had the name Troy Everett picked out for 9 years. And when we finally had our son, Tim didn't want that name anymore. So we asked the nurse for a baby name book, and she brought us the baby name book, and we wanted a name that started with the letter T. He was looking through the book, and I can still see his finger gliding down the page, and he said, "That's it right there." He handed me the book, and when I read the name, meaning, I knew that was the name. God is good.
Toby throughout school was always really funny. That's my main thing that I remember about him, is him being hilarious. He was always trying to make you laugh as a person.
Very outgoing. He always lived to make others laugh. If somebody's having a bad day, you could count on Toby to really cheer him up or make them feel included. Even the ones that felt like that there was nobody that wanted to be around them, he would make them feel at home.
All the teachers loved him. He wasn't ever like a bad child. He just wanted to make us all laugh, and we enjoyed that. We loved being around Toby. Even the teachers did. We loved having him in class. Kind of lit the room up, I would say.
Then his junior year, I did have him in class. And I knew school wasn't his thing. He was an outdoor boy. He performed very well. I never had any issues with him in class. But if I would walk around the room and I would see him doing something and he might need a little assistance, I would just, peer over his shoulder and give him instructions, and then he would just look up at me and smile with that beautiful smile that he had. But he never said much.
Toby was a jokester. He was a clown. It didn't matter if there was like the kid that was kind of picked on in high school. Toby would be the guy to walk up and joke with him and make fun with him, not at him.
He's goofy, very, very goofy. Very quiet though.
It was definitely, he was always happy. He was definitely, the outgoing person. He always had a smile on his face.
I'd known Toby my whole life, since preschool, all the way up. We went to the same preschool. I went to the Catholic school across town. He went to public school, but our friendship always stayed the same. Came here and went to high school together, and it was the very beginning, as far as I can remember back.
Some of my favorite memories of Toby was actually sports, just because we were out there connecting in multiple different ways and just having a blast together.
As a friend, he made me, he made me want to get up and go do something. He always had some wild, radical idea, he was just a funny guy, always bringing a lot of smiles around, so very happy person.
I actually dated his best friend, Eric. We dated for like 4 years. So I hung out with Toby when I hung out with Eric. We hung out outside of school. I saw him when I was at Eric's locker, was actually like right here. And yeah, I saw him at BP. We always hung out, which was a gas station here in Monroe.
He was caring, he was really caring. He loved his family. But I think, he was, if you wanted to view Toby was one strong, just independent. He didn't care if he wanted it done, he was going to get done by him. Like, he wasn't going to rely on anybody.
Toby and I would just hang out and play this video game that he started me on. I did not play video games until he introduced me to them, and we spent hours on end. We bonded over those video games, which sounds very small, but it seemed like forever, because we beat the whole video game, which is not easy to do. And in high school, whenever we ran track together, we would always hold each other's blocks
Toby was always a good dodgeball player, and I hated being on the opposite team as him because I never wanted to get hit by him throwing the ball. So I'd always pray, cross my fingers, be on Toby's team, be on Toby's team, because I didn't want him to hit me.
Definitely the Daredevil out of everybody. I know we used to go ride trails on dirt bikes and stuff, and he was the first one to try the trail. I mean, he was the first one to, you know, pop a wheelie or whatever. I had just bought a four-wheeler, and I was I think I was a freshman maybe, something like that. And I remember I left it out to his house for a weekend, and he decided that he was going to climb a hill with this four-wheeler. He could climb it with his dirt bike, but he couldn't climb it with my four-wheeler. So he kept trying it. And I remember him telling me that he was going through the woods and he had a limb come down and hit the headlight of the four-wheeler, and it broke the lens out. But he ended up telling me later on, after, you know, we got the headlight situation figured out, you know, he later on told me that he was trying to climb a hill with the four-wheeler and it went back over on top of him. So that's how he broke the headlight on the four-wheeler.
He absolutely was a kind of guy. You told him he wouldn't do something and he'd do it just because you said he wouldn't do it. Me, him, and Eric were on a gravel road one day, you know, coming around on this corner. Oh, I bet you won't turn the truck sideways going around this corner. And he said, don't think I won't, and dropped the gear and turned it sideways around the corner. Ended up in a ditch, but you know, he wasn't afraid of anything, that's for sure.
My favorite memories with Toby were probably partying, doing what we weren't supposed to be doing. I remember the tornado sirens going off, and him, Eric, and I were all riding around in his little tan truck. It was pouring rain, and the tornado sirens were going on, and we were just riding around like it wasn't about to wipe us out, but we didn't care. But yeah, we had a good time. Always had a good time.
We rode four-wheelers and dirt bikes every weekend. It didn't matter what we were doing, we were riding. Yeah, the riding was our biggest thing. That was what we did. Toby was a daredevil. He would always do the stuff first. He didn't care what it was. He was going.
Toby was like ornery. He was more crazy, wild one. His ideas normally got us into trouble or could have gotten us into trouble, but he was always just a crazy one.
Football was his big thing. I think football and riding really kept him focused, but he never liked the fact that he couldn't bench press 300 pounds like his dad.
We had weightlifting together, which he did great at. I mean, he was very physically fit and did pretty great at that.
That he always said, like, I wish I could bench press like my dad. I could play like my dad, but I think Toby was his own player. He was really good. He was a good lineman. He was a hard hitter. He was a downhill runner. He was good.
Football with Toby was something special because on the field, he may have not said much, but he was still a leader with how he actually played the game, you know. He worked hard, and a lot of people looked up to him and wanted to be like him.
When we were at practice, you know, usually it's everybody up against whoever. It's random whenever it comes to hitting drills and things, but Coach always made sure that me and him had to go together, so we were always getting the best competition.
Honestly, Toby had just such a good way of making it just feel like he was okay. Like you wouldn't look at him and think depression or anything like that because he had such a fun spirit and loving spirit that made you feel like everything was okay. Even when you weren't okay, he still made you feel like everything was okay. I think that goes to the sense of how good he was of keeping everything in, because at the same time he could have been doing terrible inside, but he made sure you were feeling okay.
When the issues came up with the positive test of marijuana, I didn't get totally alarmed on it because it's been a kid issue forever. And he'd be like, yeah, I can't believe him. This is when some other boys on the team had gotten tested positive. And I'm like, I don't understand. They know that they can't get by with it. And he's like, I know, I don't understand. And then within weeks, it was him.
When he failed his drug test, a lot of the coaches were giving him grief. We felt it was hypocritical because a lot of the people that were talking down about it were the same people doing the same thing when they were our age. So he had a lot of stuff on his mind because, you know, between all the pressure of their name and him not wanting to care about that, because Toby was his own person. And Toby didn't want to be a farmer. He didn't want to do anything in football. Once he failed, like, he completely gave up.
You know, the last day, I mean, everything was normal. Just another day. I mean, he was completely fine. So I never, in my last conversation, it wouldn't have been anything important. I mean, it was just a normal, everyday conversation as well, like I said, so.
But that spring day, I had been asked to be a judge for a We the People project.
And he may not have been the type to really put forth a lot of effort into schoolwork. That one day that we lost him, he did amazing in class. Like, the best I've ever seen him done. We had a group project and we had to go up in front of the class and present.
So each person had to speak, and I was a little anxious for Toby because I knew that wasn't really his thing, but he did amazing. He spoke, and then I thought that would be it. And as judges, we each had questions to ask, and I thought to myself, Toby won't respond to any of these questions, but he did.
I've never seen Toby do so great in class. Answered every question anyone asked him and actually gave in detail answers instead of just a 1 or 2 word answer. I was amazed sitting in there watching him give that presentation.
And that's the one thing that really struck me, was maybe that was a sign that he was trying to reach out.
Toby was not a good texter. I did not enjoy to talk to Toby in text message. He's one of those people I feel like you had to talk to in person to get the full experience of Toby.
There was definitely something that changed towards the end with him. I mean, you know, I think all of us could see it, but nothing too radical, I would say, but definitely noticed a change in him for sure.
I remember seeing the post, wait and see what happens tomorrow. But then the next day, he sent back a video of him getting in a fight at school and said, this is what I did.
I asked him what was wrong because I know he posted on Facebook, and he didn't really say much. He just said, oh, it'll be all right.
And then just on that last day, he never was the type of person to become violently angry enough to where he would want to put his hands on somebody and want to hurt somebody. So a lot of anger that day.
Like, when he got in that fight downstairs, I could tell that whole day he was different. Like, every time you look into his eyes, he just wasn't there. He was not there. He was dead set on doing something, and I didn't know what it was.
I told him then that I was sorry that he had to go through that. I knew that he felt hurt. But I told him that if he just kept being productive and holding his head high, then awesome things would come his way. He did read that, but he never responded to that last message.
We were in second hour, and he got in a fight the hour before. That was like really unlike Toby, and people were joking around calling him Rocky because he got in a fight. And I asked Toby if he'd bring his money for his senior shirt. He told me no, that he didn't need it.
Lenny had sent me a text some point in the day that Toby got in a fight. So these messages just kept kind of coming through the day.
He gave me a ride home from school that day and I talked to him about it, and I thought, you know, he kind of seemed like he was feeling better about it, and I was like, oh, good, maybe, you know, he's getting over the whole thing, and, you know, maybe he'll be back to himself. And
he took my buddy Stone up to BP, and I was sitting up there, and Stone walked over and said, Toby said he'll smoke with you tomorrow. And I was like, do what? Like, Toby, that's me and him, that's kind of our thing every day. And I looked at him, well, everyone was talking to him and, you know, joking about his fight and everything, and you're not playing this off right. And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, dude, I can tell you're mad. Like, I can tell you're sad. And he's like, no, I'm fine. And then when he didn't smoke, I could tell that was very weird. That was the biggest red flag. But that was his very last day, and that was the day he was acting weird.
It was a Wednesday night. That was book study night for the ladies and I had Toby watch Taylor. He had picked her up from her after-school church program.
We went to go grab a pizza from Casey's.
And we passed Toby on the over-ramp, and he waved at us, but he didn't like do a normal wave. Like Toby always would have his hand on the steering wheel and do a one-finger wave. And this time he just kind of did a little head nod.
And we went home and ate pizza, and he got a mirror out so I can put sand on it and play with it. And I was watching a TV while I was doing that, and after he was done eating pizza, I wanted him to play with me in the sand, so we came over and played sand. Just watched him make flowers and butterflies and stuff.
I'm not a social geek. Text very little, use my phone for work. So I wasn't in that part of the life.
Because of the situation where he was supposed to be here with Taylor, I kind of didn't think it was just, I did not believe that Toby would just leave her. So I knew it had to be something pretty serious.
I come home, 6:41 is when I pulled in, and his truck wasn't here, and I'm like, that's weird. And so I thought maybe he took Taylor somewhere, whatever. I come in the house, heard the TV, went in there, and she was laying on the floor watching TV, and I said, where's Toby? And she said, he left.
The minute after we finished, I received a text from Tim, and it said, Toby left Taylor home alone. At that very moment, my stomach tightened, and I started to panic inside.
She got really alarmed. I wasn't. I didn't see reason for what I knew of Toby to be totally alarmed. I'm like, I was going to get on him for this, because that's getting, you're going past out of bounds there. You're leaving your little sister at home.
So my mom texted me, and she was at a church function. She told me to pray because Toby was supposed to be at home watching Taylor, but Dad came home and he wasn't home.
He told us he was on depression medicine, and back we were like, what? Like, why are you depressed? You're the least person we could think. When he failed his drug test for the high school, yeah, I could see a little bit of a change in him. He wanted to go home and sleep all the time, and that's not normal, because Toby always wanted to do something, because he was always out there on the farm.
I knew that Toby had been on those pills, and that I just felt like he was going to try to hurt himself because of the conversations we had earlier, and I knew he was upset. And it didn't hit me until I received that text from Tim.
But she was in town, I was out here, so I just kept getting Taylor ready for bed, and because she was in kindergarten, and I sent him a text, little buddy, you're in trouble. You can't leave your sister at home. But I know now that by the time he didn't get it, I mean, it was done too late.
Living on a farm, Toby could be anywhere, and I didn't know where in the world to look. And I walked in and went over to the front pew and knelt down and began praying. I knew prayer was the best thing I could do, but I didn't feel like it was enough. I had to get out and look for him.
I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I knew it had to be probably pretty serious because of the situation. He did leave Taylor. That's not like Toby. He would have never done that.
Lenny texted me we tried to talk, phones went dead.
I don't even remember how, but I ended up with Cody, and he got in with me in the vehicle, and Cody just suggested I go to the coach's house. So we drove over, and actually both coaches were there. And when we were there talking to him in the driveway, he asked if I thought I needed to call 911.
She said she was getting ready to call the sheriff. I'm like, I think you're getting completely, going overboard on this. I don't see any need in doing all that. And I went outside because when she was talking to me, somebody else was trying to call me, and I couldn't get that call, and I tried to call it back. And nobody would answer, nobody.
And I did feel like I needed to, so I did call 911.
I guess I went upstairs and looked around the room, and I was like, I don't see nothing unusual up here. Come down the closet, popped the door open, started going through the guns, and noticed his rifle was gone. And I'm like, I don't know, it's a little alarming, but I don't know that he don't have it anyway, that he don't just carry it with. I don't know. I mean, them boys will go shooting stuff all the time. I don't know, but it alarmed me enough that I'm like, hey, he's got his rifle.
And I had called Toby's cousin, Keegan. I felt like he would know where to go. So I got a hold of him, and he did go looking for him.
And then Keegan called me crying and was like, you need to look for him.
So Cody and I are speeding, trying to get out to the country and just go down the gravel roads to try and see if we could find his truck. We heard the sirens, and we actually passed the field where he was.
So I heard sirens coming from town because the air was heavy. It was going to rain. And it had already rained in the afternoon. And I heard sirens, and I could see on top of the hill, standing on the sidewalk, and I could see him, and I'm like, because Lenny said Keegan seen his truck over by your mom and dad's.
I just remember Keegan calling me because Aunt Lenny was worried, and it's like we immediately knew where to go. And then everything after that was kind of just a blur.
They stopped me, and I wanted to drive, but my mother-in-law told me that she would drive. And I knew then that things weren't right.
I got the phone call from Keegan, and he was crying, saying they found his truck, or he'd found his truck. Well, I didn't think they'd found Toby, and then Lenny was on the phone with my grandma and said I needed to get down there.
We went back to the field, and by then the fire truck was there.
I went downstairs to my mom, and I was like, they can't find Toby. And Mom was like, well, that's odd. And she's like, well, let's go out to Lenny's house. I was like, no, I don't really know what's going on. She was like, no, we need to go out there.
Pretty soon, once I got her to bed, one of his classmates and Mom showed up and said, you need to go.
His dad was pacing outside, and Taylor was inside sleeping, and he couldn't leave. So we went out there and we stayed, and so he went out and looked for him.
And when I get up on top of the hill and look down the bottoms, I could see lights everywhere. I'm like, ugh. Still, I wasn't that, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know, that it was to the extent that it was. I had no idea.
I saw Keegan at the edge of the field, and he was sitting on the ground with his hands cupped to his forehead, and he was rocking back and forth. I already knew the answer, but I got to him and I grabbed his wrist and I said, is there any hope? And he just shook his head no.
And when I seen all the lights, that's when I knew like something bad had happened. And yeah, that's probably it was probably the worst day ever.
He dropped me off and told him see you tomorrow, and tomorrow never came. I can't really remember that whole night. Kind of becomes a blur. I can't remember exactly like who told me. I just remember going out there and, you know, everyone crying, and it's just, I don't know, something you can't describe.
And then Eric called me. I was like, he did it. And I said, he did what? And then he yelled at me. He said he shot himself.
It's just like he's driving into a morgue. You've seen people in states of minds that you'd never seen. Just, Keegan was just walking in circles. People just, women crying.
Mom called me. She told me to come home right now. And she just didn't sound like herself, really. And I basically wouldn't let up until she told me why I needed to come home. I really wanted to hear the urgency. And she said, he's gone.
My cousin come up to me and said, put his hand on my shoulder and said, sorry, bud. I just kind of looked at him. I said, where's Lenny? When Ashley was telling her story, he's like, she's in the van. She opened the door up. She don't know I'm there. She's on the phone. She's talking to them. I could hear every word she said. And Ashley, she said, you got to come home. And she's walking past and she's like, Toby's gone. I'm like, oh, shit. The one thing that you don't want to happen just happened. So you just feel helpless. You have no control, which might be one of the best lessons in life, to realize that you really don't have control. Didn't get trained for this. So my mind just started telling me that, you know, hey, many people have lost their children in life. You got to just start working through it, and you just do the best you can. And it's not fun.
And I pulled up to the parking lot, and I remember one of my teachers, you know, she recognized my car, and she pulled up and she got out of her car hysterical, you know, crying. And she just asked me, you know, what happened to Toby? And like I said, I didn't know at that point. I was clueless.
We were out there for a little bit, and there was a thunderstorm rolling in. So they said everyone was gonna go to the school, and, you know, we came here. And
I got a text from one of my friends saying what had happened. I called that person immediately and I was like, so what's going on? They said that we were all meeting up at the school. So we all came up here. It was raining. So much of us, all of his classmates, we were all just standing outside the school, just crying and hugging each other, teachers, our principals, just family. Everyone was out there just gathering, and it was nice to be all together, but it was for a horrible reason. And at that time, it just felt like we couldn't do anything. Like, how did it even get to this point?
Me personally, I probably noticed it the last 6 months. Kind of kept to himself, you know, wasn't as talkative, just kind of didn't hang out as much, and he didn't come out anymore.
Looking back, I didn't really notice anything different, and still looking back, I really didn't notice anything different. We used to party together. He would, if anything, I think he reached out to us more.
Every day you'll have a new struggle. Things get better with time, and I know it may seem that what you're going through is just unbearable, or you just feel like it's just time to give up, but at the same time you have tons of people out there that you don't even know love and care about you. And
looking back, I wish I could say that I noticed a lot of changes, but I feel like we weren't educated that well. If we're not properly taught, it's hard to notice that that stuff is going on in someone that you would have never thought. And I think that was one of the biggest things that I wish that we would have had a little bit more education on.
How could I better myself to notice the things, you know, that were different prior to the day that he, you know, took his life? And like I said, it's just little things that you would think that isn't a sign, they are signs. And you know, now I know that to look in for somebody.
He told me he didn't need the shirt. If I knew what I knew now, maybe I would have said something or did more. Because little did I know that later on that day, it was going to be a world changer for all of us.
Pretty humbling to realize that your own children will make decisions without asking you. You're like, Well, wish they would have. This wouldn't have been the choice I'd have told them to take. But I didn't get asked. So here we are.
Really, the only piece of advice I tell anybody is just to talk to somebody, because people have no idea what other people are feeling unless you tell them.
I personally didn't have any education on depression. I didn't know the signs of it. I didn't know, like, somebody that's depressed, what they go through or like what they think, medications, anything like that. I don't necessarily blame anybody for us not being educated, but I wish it didn't take a tragedy for us to be educated.
I got out of the truck, and as I was rounding the corner of the door, I had a moment. The thought came to me that this is more real than this life we know. This is more real than what you know now here on earth. You like Toby to give you a ride?
Bye, Toby.
You can't have a relationship with Jesus through your mom or through your dad or through your grandma or grandpa or anyone else. You have to have that relationship with Jesus for yourself. Toby heard that message, and he was here on a Sunday, and he died the following Wednesday. I didn't know how powerful that was until after Toby was gone. I just felt like God was speaking to him that day.